what I found quite interesting was that the landscape would always see another aspect, and then it would see like a letter, and then at this part, it finally sees the part.
The part, which is like what we're getting. I think I would always thought it would be the O.
So it was kind of funky because the fungus is like blocking stuff out. I noticed that when Jericho was reading, he added like the or like filler words to make sense of it.
Right.
Because the fungus isn't making sense.
Yeah.
So like it helps our understanding.
It's like the constraints that like it's like really hard for us to make sense.
Yeah.
What does stylobate mean?
Base
Continuous base supporting a row of columns in classical Greek.
What's interesting about that not once did the fungus block out that entire word like completely.
Yeah.
And it's the base.
Whoa.
So that was the base completely blocked out.
I thought of how like the destroying agent in this piece is nature, and we could say that maybe nature doesn't have emotions, but like the text itself is asserting maybe that the rock has sympathy, or that there's a sympathy between the matter of the rock. This is a collaborative text with an element of nature, and we don't have control over what it's destroying, you know? Mm-hmm. And if we revert it back to the intent of the experiment to reverse this process of destruction that we create as humans, we do have control over that. But in some ways, I think that we've removed that feeling of control, you know? We feel like there's maybe this apathy surrounding environmental issues and stuff like that. And so I find that interesting, that in this reversal, we're seeing this exaggerated form of that there's not a control in what this fungus is destroying of the text.
I don't mean to say that I don't agree with you, but what I find interesting in the tweet above that, and a rock having itself around it this tiny of the Parthenon is to be a bond, the building and the ground on which the play of and s, right? So that immediately draws my thinking to, and I think it's actually something perhaps when the Parthenon was actually built, you know, in ancient Greek times, that may have been sort of a means of asserting man's dominance over nature. However, our modern mindset is that we really appreciate that melding of the lines between the Parthenon itself and the rock of the Acropolis. I mean, that's one of the fundamental aspects, I think, of kind of the modern organic architectures, that we really enjoy those seamless lines between the things that we create, put on paper, and then construct ourselves, and what is already there in the natural world. Because we can't remove ourselves entirely from that connection with nature. It's impossible. I mean, just short of turning our brains into some mechanical thing, you know. But like, even beyond that, just encountering man's form in nature, or humankind's form in nature, is like, we immediately recognize that.
The appearance of being seamless, it's like underneath it there is this very complicated process of destroying Earth and destroying what is there to make something that is in the end still asserting our dominance over nature.
I was thinking, like, if we're all like amateur archaeologists and we were to find this somewhere, you know, in the ruins of an ancient ruins at a library or something, and we were to try to piece this back together to come up with a coherent text without the reference of the original text, how many different ways would we interpret this? And how many different words would we put to fill in those blanks that are different? So it kind of makes me wonder about the history of ancient texts that are found, whether they're on the tablet or whether they're carved into stone, and how much of that may have been misinterpreted over the years.
And how much of that was written by
Yeah.
That's where I'm at, where him, it's like, is it trying to communicate with us? Is it learning? It's a network. So what if it's trying to communicate with its fellow fungi?
This is kind of more kind of a vibe or feeling I get from this. This is almost like something that was printed or created by an AI program, like these really kind of chopped up, unnatural sentences that nobody would use. Even when they make sense, it's kind of like nobody would say it like that.
So I think maybe one of the reasons why people were laughing when they saw the feed right away is like, oh, well, you know, fungus can't destroy us as humanity, but maybe AI can. The fact that it takes the language of AI. It's so interesting.
I think it's interesting that we read them in the order that we did, because like you said, if we flipped it, we would actually get sense out of it, because it's what it seems like is that the camera is reading it, you know, top to bottom, but then it's as it's tweeting out, you know, the most recent is the last one that it sent. So I think it'd be interesting to try to read it both ways.
If you read the line right in the middle and sympathy between rock, the and, but you read it backwards and the rock between sympathy and, it's pretty interesting how it changes the whole.
Reading it this way, I feel like we're kind of searching for that structure and searching for that understanding, which maybe is what the fungus is trying to do
It becomes a meta text, right?
Yeah.
It's a meta fungus here. Yeah. I think it would be interesting if you were to do it again with the same exact text to see if the fungus would take the same path.
Ooh,
That's
yeah.
actually the exact
would
same.
see
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
what
Side by
what
side,
it what is it doesn't like, what does nature not want in this text, and then it goes back to when we was talking about how we make our own sense of it. So when we find these texts and we add in words to make it sense to us, what if the fungus is taking out those things that we've put in? What if it's going back to the natural form of it?
Fungus and moss and all these elements would eat away at the actual architecture itself without humans having the energy to observe it. I think it's almost like it's kind of symbolic of what it's talking about, eating away, talking about the Parthenon.
Right.
And that's already kind of happened in the Parthenon in a way.
That text is really old, and we still have it because it's digitized,
We know.
and it lasted long enough for us to get to see it.
I find it interesting that some texts are repeated over and over. So we were talking about like style bait or like something that came out of that came to me. I was like, interesting. Like for we know or we know, no. Like those words are never kind of separated.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what if we had a different book or a different text? Would the fungus do the same thing for that text? Like, would those words stick out almost to the fungus? Isn't that kind of like insane? Like, oh, like, or we know what we're doing.
What words are being consumed? These are the ones that are left behind, but what words are
Yes,
eating?
that's always our question with
Gone
a
extinct.
redaction, right?
But I mean,
it's like
what
a
was he
government
trying to say?
document.
I can't help but think about the fact that we read this like humans do. We're not, you know, if we were to read it like fungus would, it would be significantly different.